Hey everyone, this is Amanda Moore from the Angelman Syndrome Foundation, and you're listening to the ASF podcast, the show that explains everything you want to know about Angelman Syndrome. We're so excited you're here, and we hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to the Angelman podcast. I'm really excited about our guest today because so many people in our community have either attended an intensive or have asked about it, and it's becoming such a really amazing resource for our community. So I'm excited to have Bryan LaScala with us today, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the NAPA Center, which is where a lot of our individuals with Angelman syndrome get their intensive. So Bryan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Excited to join.
Yeah, so Bryan, tell me a little bit about yourself and why get into this work and why it's important to you.
Sure. So my why is very intertwined with NAPA and our founding. So I'll start by touching on that, which I'll try to keep brief because it could be a very, very long story as well.
Okay.
So my mom, Lynette LaScala, is actually the founder of NAPA. And she started out kind of on her journey when my brother, Cody LaScala, had a near drowning accident on his first birthday. So we were living in California at the time. She was packing for the water park. We had a babysitter that was with her as well. And, babysitter thought my mom had Cody. My mom thought the babysitter had Cody. And he had recently learned how to crawl, and he got out into the newly built pool, which didn't have a gate on it yet. And he had fallen in, and Cody was not given a lot of hope from that. Mm-hmm. And, it really kind of put her on her mission, because when he was discharged from the hospital, Cody's prognosis and what the doctors kind of had told her is like, you need to move on with your life. She was pregnant with me at the time and said, essentially Cody wasn't going to really come out of his comatose state, and you should, kind of leave him in a home and move on. So she is not the person that was going to take that as the answer. So, this is a very long time ago. So we're talking 35 years now. And we didn't have social media. We didn't have, really community groups or really kind of anywhere for her to turn but the library. So she literally went to the library to figure out, like, what is cerebral palsy? Like, what can I do to help, support, give Cody the best life possible? And, that eventually led her to the Institute's program in Philadelphia. It was kind of the first more unique program that she took Cody to. And that program essentially kind of gave you a really strong structure, for really kind of overloading the brain, with stimuli and all these different exercises and all these things for you to do at home. And it was literally 20 hours per day. You had volunteers in and out of the house, and it was working on really awakening the brain from the state it was in with Cody. So he had phenomenal progress from that program and really started to, make eye connection and started to laugh and, eventually started to be able to pick up his legs and roll over and do these things that at the time, nobody knew if that was going to be possible.
Yeah.
And for me as a brother, I'm, running and jumping over him and getting him to kick me, just doing all these things that siblings do. So, that was really kind of the start of her journey with Cody, which continued to just look at, what other therapies are out there. And, going to traditional therapy, eventually we had moved back to Iowa, where she was from. And the city we were in, we had rehab, outpatient rehab clinics that offered, physical therapy and some occupational therapy, and speech therapy was really more in schools, but there's, they were really built for adults, and there wasn't anything really for pediatrics, and certainly not for, somebody with cerebral palsy that needs, somebody with, that unique experience to support Cody. So, but granted, they did everything they could, with what they had to support him. And he really, started to plateau really kind of when he was like 8 or 9 with his progress. And, at the time he he's still gaining, significant progress where he's able to sit up and play video games with his feet, and he's able
Yeah.
to, type on the computer with his feet, and he's driving his chair with a head array. So he's just really continuing to gain his independence. And um, as he's kind of plateauing and we're looking for kind of what else is out there, Cody actually, he was given, awarded a wish from Make-A-Wish, and he chose for the family to go skiing in Colorado.
Oh,
So we did that and went skiing as a family, and he was, I believe it was the 10,000th or the 1,000th wish. So he was featured by Make-A-Wish, and Extra ended up picking it up and was supposed to do a segment on Cody and his wish in skiing in Colorado. And the segment was bumped for this new innovative therapy in Poland for children
oh,
with cerebral palsy. So that's the reason we were sitting down getting ready to watch this. And then that was actually how my mom and our family was introduced to this program in Euromed or in Poland called Euromed. So three
interesting.
months later, she's, on a plane headed to Poland with Cody for this intensive program that it was a month long, 6 days per week, 5 to 6 hours per day. And it's very kind of Eastern European approach to therapy.
Hmm.
So not as play-based as we are at NAPA
Yeah.
or kind of you see more pediatric clinics today, but it was very, they had a lot of different, therapies and tools and modalities that weren't being used in the US that Cody did phenomenally from. And he was at an age too where he was competitive and he wanted to get up and, play sports with me and let do a
Yeah.
lot of these things. So although it was really hard and tough on him, at being so young, he did really great from the program. And after his first month, was starting to take individual steps on his own and
Wow.
you know, getting through that, my mom's like, okay, how do we get back here? It's like we did not have, the means just to continue to travel to Poland and pay out of pocket for therapy, but she fundraised and did everything she could, to try to get Cody back. So he ended up going 9 times.
Wow.
And really by his third session started taking like independent steps and getting kind of that meaningful weight exchange and a lot of things down and continued to make just great gains from that. But as she was fundraising and doing everything she could to get Cody in the paper, she started connecting with a lot of other families, and then at the time, social media still wasn't here, but like, internet chat groups and like forums and blogs and things like that
Yeah.
were kind of more where families were connecting. So she was able to connect with a lot of families and help support them in being able to go to Poland and kind of like organically fell into this kind of parent representative role for Euromed. And eventually she actually formalized that as kind of a way she could get credit, for Cody to be able
Yeah.
to continue to go to therapy. So she became the US parent representative for Euromed, and she was setting up conferences for them and essentially just connecting with families, sharing her story, helping them get booked in for their own sessions. And through that process, she connected with another family that was eager to bring this program to the US because his daughter also had attended. And he had connections to be able to raise some money and pull all of that together and to do that and convinced her to join him as her marketing director. So at the time, we were still in Iowa. He was in Los Angeles. He wanted to open the company and base it in Los Angeles. And she's like, "My two kids that are senior year in high school, I'm not going to move, to LA." And he's like, "I don't care. Like, we can do this remote. We can figure it
Yeah.
out. You can come once a month." So she ended up doing that where she was traveling once per month for a week to Los Angeles. And at the time, it was called Napa Institute. And really, it was framed after, this European method and still very much really kind of more physical therapy based and gross motor focused. Um, but unfortunately, like the funding ran out and, it was really kind of just not managed super well financially.
Hmm.
Clinically, everything was great.
Yeah.
But I think that the intentions were more, you know, let's build this into something from a monetary perspective and
Yeah.
focusing kind of on the core of like, let's just get this off the ground and focus on having something for families here so they
Yeah.
don't have to
Yeah.
travel to Poland. So funding ran out within 9 months. Her job was to essentially get families, scheduled into the intensive program, and she was doing that. and was told basically on a Thursday that tomorrow is going to be our last day. The families that are supposed to come, and show up on Monday are not going to be able to
Oh,
come. So
wow.
you need to call them, let them know we're closing, and essentially that's it. So
Wow.
she again didn't want to take that as an answer. So
Yeah.
she, went back to him. She's like, "What can we do to make this happen?" And he's like, "Really, it's done. We can't. It's like we haven't paid rent for. This is not going to continue." So he's like, "You could take the keys and try to, do this on your own.
Yeah.
But that's it." So she did that, and she convinced a few other therapists to join her. They went and found a warehouse in Los Angeles, and they opened up the following Monday as NAPA
Wow.
Center. So it was a very, very quick turnaround, and really kind of that's how NAPA Center was founded and born. And it was really a rough first couple of years because she also she's like, these families paid deposits or they paid in
Yeah.
full, and we're going to credit them. Like we're going to make it work and we're going to figure it out so that way they don't take the financial hit for this. So she did that and really just kind of honored everything families had paid, and just we're going to figure out a way to make it work, and just kept
Wow.
her optimism rolling, and made it happen. And I was in college at the time, kind of hearing all of this from afar, and I'm like, well, it's good luck, mom. I
Yeah,
don't know,
right.
I don't know how I can help, but I really, want to see you succeed. And she did, she really just bootstrapped to make it happen. And I really working toward kind of graduating college. I initially, when I went into college, I wanted to go into physical therapy, and then I switched to business about midway through, and decided I really didn't want to work in the world of disability when I graduated.
Hmm.
So joining NAPA was kind of never in the cards, because I just had been in that world my whole life, just
Yeah.
as a sibling. And whether it's working in respite care or a couple other jobs that I have that were disability focused, I just wanted to go do my own thing. So
Sure.
um, I eventually, so once I graduated, I decided to move out to Los Angeles, trial, living in California, and see if that was for me. And at the time, I was like, well, you can come help support us for a couple months while you're interviewing and applying for jobs. I can't afford to bring on a full-time marketing person because that was my what I studied in college. And so that was kind of the initial plan, was come try it for a couple months, help out at NAPA where I can, and then eventually move on. And as I started connecting with families, and a lot of families that were, just brand new, diagnosed, and, being told, this is diagnosis your child has, you can,
Yeah.
try to, and at the time, luckily social media, was really kind of what NAPA, I think, really was built on, because
Sure.
families being able to connect with other families, and luckily with your guys' group, and really kind of driving a lot of the online community and in-person community, that was really just getting off the ground at that time. So even the few people that were coming to NAPA, they were, really our biggest advocates in a lot of these groups, and letting everyone know this is what we've done, this is really what's worked for us. And some of these families that are just kind of brand new into this world and reaching out to me and asking me all these questions as a 22-year-old of, well, what worked for you guys and what did you try? And,
Yeah.
and all of these things. And I'm like, I don't know any of this, I was a brother, but I can't give you guys, advice. And I didn't really put a lot of stock, I think, into myself and being a
Yeah.
part of that journey. But as I started to kind of lean into that more and connect with these families and see them come, and have the progress that they had, and want to return, and see how kind of really special it was what we were doing, that kind of cemented me into okay, I want to be a part of this, and I want to make this
Yeah.
happen. And, that's really kind of what continues to drive me. And at the time we were still one location in Los Angeles, and, we've now grown to, we're going to be opening our sixth location in Charlotte in the US this year. We have three locations in Australia and one in London. And all of those really have been driven by parents as well, where it's we
Yeah.
have parents that reach out to us and say hey, at first it was Singapore. We have a family in Singapore saying, we want you guys to come out, to Singapore. There's groups of families here, and, we can support you in doing that. It's slow during your winter, and convinced us to kind of start doing these pop-up sessions, which eventually led us to families in Australia, and them pushing to support us in getting there. And, it's really still just driven by families. And I think that founding, even though my mom's now transitioned out of the business, like we have almost all of our general managers of each of our clinics are parents, and I think
Yeah,
that's it's what continues to drive us and have that focus is, you know, being able for all of us to stay on the path of like what's our purpose and
sure.
when we're making any decision kind of at any level, like is it supporting us in our mission and being able to continue to
Yeah,
support families at the highest level. So yeah, so that's our founding. We continue to really grow. I think, especially looking at kind of how we've started with intensives and having more of a physical therapy focused. We've continued to expand that where we've now integrated, very early on, we really integrated occupational therapy and speech therapy and a lot of different modalities and tools kind of really under that, allowing our therapists to really tailor each of our patients or children's programs kind of around their own needs. So
yeah,
I think that continues to be our focus when we're looking at like what else is out there that we can, really support our therapists being able to support our kids. And
yeah.
that's and at any time we're making any of those decisions on, um, you know, different therapies or tools to trial or things like that, that's, kind of back to our core of what is, our mission and what are we trying to do.
I love it because it's so amazing. I'm always inspired at what a parent who gets devastating news or gets whatever news about their child, and then mom, dad, whoever, like, doesn't take that diagnosis for an answer. And it's like, you tell me my kid's not going to walk, you watch, my kid's going to
Yeah.
walk. And I'm going to create an intensive center to make it happen. And it's always very unbelievable to see that journey. And I love, there's so many parts of your journey that speak to our community, with your mom being super engaged, but even you touched on the sibling perspective and, how our siblings do live and breathe this, that disability as well, and sometimes they want to get engaged and continue that work after, and sometimes they don't want to, and either way is perfectly fine when it comes to siblings. So I love that story. So for those of families who have never heard of the NAPA Center or never heard of an intensive, can you
Mhm.
share a little bit about like your approach and what this tradition, like a traditional session or a traditional, like if someone were to sign up, what that looks like?
Yep. So we specialize in the 3-week intensive therapy programs. We also offer therapies, and we call them kind of in a weekly session or traditional framework as well.
Okay.
But our intensive model, essentially, it's every one of our clinics offers 3-week programs that are continuously running throughout the year. So January 6th, next year is our first intensive session that we're going to be offering. And that session will be 3 weeks long in length, depending on the clinic size. We'll have 15 to 25 kids that are all starting kind of their programs at the same day and running for that 3-week period. Each child's program is different. So
Okay.
even if they're attending, because there's some of the modalities and things that we offer that a lot of our kids will overlap, and kind of some of those bigger types of therapies are the same, but their individual programs are all very different.
Mhm.
Um, and so the process of a family kind of like leading up to, receiving their program or joining an intensive with us is they're completing their patient intake paperwork, and that's evaluated by one of our rehab directors to,
Okay.
ultimately determine what types of therapies might be best for, this child to participate in within their intensive. And really that's focused or driven by, a lot of the family's goals where that child's, currently is ability wise, their medical history, their height, their weight, where they are kind of like across all the different aspects in terms of like, gross motor and speech and a lot of those things that ultimately we do rely on the families to determine which of these do you want to focus on, and then our therapists provide really their recommendation on their own experience and knowledge on here's what we think you should focus on kind of right now, and what we're recommending in an intensive now for that one child for that same child might be different in 6 months or a year from now,
Right.
depending on, their current abilities and um, also their, just physically where they are. Because some of the modalities we can only offer, based on kind of height, weight, where the child
Sure.
is, currently.
Sure. Hey guys, it's Amanda here. As you know, we're here for you, our community. If you have questions about any topics we can discuss in our podcast, or if you have ideas for future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. All you need to do is email me at dearamanda@angelman.org. Thank you so much for listening and your continued support of the Angelman Syndrome Foundation.
So yeah, so each child's program is different. It runs for a 3-week period. We focus, I guess, throughout that intensive, the first couple of days of that is, evaluation and, assessment. And, we start kind of really treating on day one as well. But it's really kind of, that's where the actual plan of care is developed for that full 3 weeks. And then we carry out that plan of care toward the middle of the last week is when we start shifting to getting more parent involvement in terms of training them on how they can continue some of these exercises. And we provide them a home program of what they can continue to do once they leave, because
So can I ask something about that?
Yeah.
So when you say the parent is involved, so typically like on a 3-week program, you're obviously evaluating the first few days, but for the most part, is the parent actually in the room or are they removed during this time and you're working with them pretty much the full day?
Most parents are on the mat, involved, in there, like for the session. It does depend. Like some kids do much better if the parents aren't in the room.
I was about to say Jackson would not do anything if I was sitting right there because he would just want to cuddle and love. So
yeah, that's right. So and depending on that, I mean, sometimes that's tough because especially if your brand, if this is a first intensive you have with us, and essentially you're leaving your child, with a therapist and needing to leave the room. That's like really tough, for some families, and sometimes it takes a little bit for our therapist to kind of really realize like, ooh, your child's doing really good when you're not in the room. So maybe we should continue to try that. But I think for the most part, our families are there during most of the sessions and involved in that. It's just not until the last session when we really start to try to get them involved in terms of transitioning and practicing their home program and really looking at like because not all the exercises and everything we do are appropriate for parents to be doing.
Sure.
It's just looking at, what 6 or 8 or 10 exercises are really going to give you the best bang for your buck and continuing these with your kid. Because it's just hard, I think, as a parent to be able to convince your kid that I'm not a parent right now, I'm a therapist, and you need to, you need to listen and you need to work through this. So, so we really try to work with the parents and developing something that's realistic for them. Some might tell us, I really only want, 4 things we can do, and I only want to, focus on something I can do in 15 minutes in the morning. What could I do for that? So we also try to tailor around what is most realistic for our families too.
I'm curious, because for a lot of our families, obviously these intensives, just like for your mom, they weren't around back in the day. And so I'm curious when it comes to your centers, is there an age range that you go up to, or do you have any sort of advice for someone who may have an older individual with Angelman that's like, I've never done anything like this, but it could be beneficial. It's never too late to kind of gain some skills. Like, what is the age range typically?
Yeah, so we don't have a cutoff as far as age range goes, but I would say, some of our youngest kids that are starting intensives, I'd say most will start around 2 years old. We've had 6-month-olds, that are starting, and they might only be doing 1 hour feeding therapy and maybe an hour of physical therapy.
Sure.
But for the most part, I think most of our kids are between, I think, 2 and 6, I think, are kind of like the bulk.
Yeah.
And then we do have kids, because I think it's also just hard on families once you reach school age to to pull your kids out of school for
Sure.
3 weeks at a time. And
Yeah. Yeah.
summers are obviously the most popular time families are trying to come to us. So it's
Yeah.
also the most difficult for families to get in at that point. Um, but I'd say, yeah, 2 to 6 is probably the majority of the kids that are completing intensives. But we also have, a good amount, I think, are, probably between the 6 to 12 range. And then, I think 12 to 18 is probably, we have less of
Yeah.
those kiddos. We do have some that, literally have started with us when it was NAPA Institute, 15, 16 years ago and are,
Yeah. Yeah.
still doing an intensive a year with us. So
It's
it's,
amazing.
and I think it's just also us communicating with the parent in terms of, what we think, is appropriate and making sure our goals and their goals are aligned. And if there is something, that's close by to their families, like for instance, they're starting to become more, um, almost more like gym settings for, because like my brother now, he's not somebody that we can convince to do therapy very easily.
Yeah.
But looking at some of these gyms that were originally, I think most of them are focused kind of on spinal cord injuries and things like that, but are really good, I think, options for young adults to feel like they're going somewhere that have, a lot of them basically have a lot of like therapy aides that do have backgrounds kind of more focused on spinal cord injury, but they're able to support really, I think, a very wide range of disability. If your goal is, very gross motor focused and you want to, really focus on maintaining your ability and really focused on just, your gross motor goals,
Yeah.
or,
Yeah.
really, you just want to like have somewhere to be able to go to have community and to be able
Yeah.
to feel like you're going to the gym and working out. I think, a lot of those places are great for that. So when we do have new families reach out to us, that have, whether it's young adults or teens, we just make sure we're communicating, the majority of the kids here are going to be between 2 and 6.
Sure.
We are capable and more than, happy and willing, and we want to, support, your child in coming to us, but they need to be, okay and wanting to work out kind of in that setting
Sure.
as well,
Yeah.
because
No, I totally get
it's not
that.
for everyone.
I totally get that. I think it's always just a really, at least for our community, I always try to make sure people hear me when we talk about whether it's therapies, even like speech and learning communication devices. It's never too late to try. You just never
Yeah.
know the capability. So I'm curious too. So I know you're not located in every city. So a lot of families, if they want to take advantage, it is something that is costly because there's travel involved. You're getting, going there. We at the ASF have a family fund where a lot of people apply for the family fund to go to an intensive, and we give, grants for that. Are there financial assistance programs, or how do you all work with the families to help them when it comes to enrolling into NAPA?
Yeah. So we do bill insurance directly. So
Okay.
like typically like your commercial PPO insurance payers will, whether we're in network or not, we will bill them. And they typically will pay 1 hour of PT, OT, and speech therapy per day, for their intensive. So if you're doing a 3 hour intensive, you might get, that covered. Obviously, like every insurance plan is different. And
Different.
if we're
Yeah.
in network or out network,
That's
there's,
the beautiful part of insurance that we all have to deal
right.
with every day, right?
Yeah. And it's something like we want to make that experience as great as our therapy is for families, but it's
Yeah,
hard.
it
Insurance
is.
billing it's something we try to improve every day. And ultimately, like I think it's really difficult when we're calling to verify someone's in benefits. And the first thing we're told is this is not a guarantee of benefits,
Yeah.
but then we need to take that and provide an estimate from it. So, when that ends up being misquoted, or something, like ultimately that still falls on us, where it's
Yeah.
like we try to do everything we can, but there's still, occasionally some lapses there that we try to do everything we can to avoid, but they happen. So,
Yeah.
but on the insurance side, they typically will pay for 1 hour of each modality per day. Obviously, it depends on your plan and if you have a hard max on, your visits and a lot of different things. So we always encourage families to reach out, well, even after you speak with us, reach out to your insurance company directly to, really ensure, you're understanding kind of like this coverage and
Sure.
everything as well. So we do provide families an estimate for here's what we anticipate your out-of-pocket costs to be for an
Okay.
intensive. So depending on how many hours each family is doing and their own plan, that still can be, significant for families. So in terms of other resources, there are a lot of different grant programs and things like that out there. I think what's tough is navigating, the enrollment period or the
Yeah.
application periods and whether
Yeah.
somebody is still active and a lot of things. So I don't know if you've heard of Support Now.
Yes, we actually just joined them as partners and we'll be announcing it to the community soon. And it's great because we can, if a parent comes to us and they say, we really want to do intensive, but we don't know if we can afford it, we can go to their city, we can go to their state, and we can look for grants specifically in their area. So that
Yeah,
will be a great resource for families moving forward with this as well.
yeah. So we
Yeah.
partnered with them as well. So
Oh,
we've
good.
yeah, so we're offering that to our families, which
Oh,
essentially just kind
perfect.
of allows them to navigate, if I'm in Ohio and I want to do an intensive in Chicago, like what does that mean? What's out there for me?
Yeah,
So we're looking at integrating their platform like onto our website as well. So
that's
that way we can
fantastic.
try to make it as easy as possible for
I,
families. And I know Abby, the founder of Support
yeah.
Now, she's doing everything she can to make it as simple as possible. I think, they're hoping, I think eventually to be able to get to the point where families can, submit applications really even through the platform and,
Which
and
would be
do all this.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be great. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. So I have two more questions. I could probably talk to you all day, but so just knowing how your story started and your mom, I know our community very well, and I know we're going to have families listening to this and saying like, I want to get a NAPA in my city or my state. Like, I guess that for those families that are listening and thinking about that, like, what is the process and how do you determine where you're opening new centers?
It has been very slow process as far as because we've been really careful about
Yeah,
our own growth and making sure we're really able to maintain the quality of our program at the speed of our growth. That's always, even opening our second clinic, which was actually in Sydney, that was a big learning experience for us.
sure.
But um, that really is kind of driven the speed at which we can open new clinics. So right now, so opening in Charlotte, our focus has been spreading kind of really throughout the US to make
Yeah,
us as close as possible to as many families as we can. So really kind of we've now opening in Charlotte. I mean, there's still a hole, I think, really in the Pacific Northwest.
yeah,
But it's also now they're starting to become there are other options, I think, for intensive programs out there.
yeah,
As far as families wanting to reach out to support getting a NAPA to them, they can feel free to reach out to me directly. Most families do, and I always like to connect with families and hear about that
sure.
because I think there's a lot of when families do have a parent does have a very unique background and is very well connected in their community and has a plan and everything in place for us.
Yeah,
I do love to hear that and see if that is something that, we can, even if it's not the traditional path we've grown at this point. Um, we're very open, to
yeah,
hearing, any other feedback or any other ways we can support, being able to connect with families and opening up a clinic
that's
near
awesome.
them. We don't we don't franchise or anything now. So like currently everything we've been opening has been within kind of the under the NAPA umbrella. And that has, I think, slowed our, I think,
Sure.
opportunity to grow, but at the same time, it just allowed us to really maintain, the experience. Because I think we've been able to do that now, and it's been, I think, a huge accomplishment for our team. Where if a family goes to NAPA in really Los Angeles or Austin or Boston, they're getting that same experience and they're
Yeah,
not able to attend at one certain therapy in one clinic and not in the other, or the quality is, totally off in one or the other. So I think that will continue to be our focus in the future as well.
Yeah, quality over quantity, right? That's so important. So, for my last question, just to wrap it up, if you like for the families that are listening, if you had one piece of advice or encouragement as they're thinking about maybe looking into this, what's the piece of advice you would give them as they're starting looking into maybe doing an intensive?
I think being um, yeah, I mean, I think the biggest piece of advice I think I have is to one start because I think
Yeah,
like really connecting with other families, and hearing about experiences is probably the most beneficial thing you can do because I think really families are the best judge, whether it's us or other intensive clinics that are out there of one quality, but two kind of just their overall experience and what that was like and really kind of trust in that. And I think try not to get discouraged, by some of the roadblocks along the way, because even with NAPA, all of our clinics, through next year, I think we have one or two openings currently left, but everything through 2025 is now booked out. But
booked out. Yeah,
we do have wait lists at each of our clinics that continue to move. Like we really have two or three probably openings for each of our intensive sessions across all of our clinics that happen for various reasons. Because I think as everyone knows, like things come up and
life
surgeries and
happens.
people get sick. Yeah. So I think a lot of opportunity does come. So if you do hit a roadblock, whether it's with that or with funding or anything else along the way, I think it's important to, really try to just continue to look ahead and look at your options and um, also I think connecting with the clinic and um, that you're interested in and really kind of like going off of your own intuition and judgment
Yeah.
of what you think you should do because there's a lot out there now, but again I think leaning on families to kind of like be able to determine what you should try and what you should do
Yeah.
is also a great resource.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for your time today. And thank you for all the work that you are doing, not only for our community, but so many more like it. And, I love your story. I love your mom for her tenacity. So thank her for her vision. And if people are interested, can you just give kind of a shout out to your website where they should start off at?
Yeah, so our website's napacenter.org. You can also follow us on Instagram. You can see a lot of like the different therapies we offer, and there's a lot of tips for parents and a
Oh,
lot of
awesome.
things on there as well. So our Instagram handle is just NAPA Center, so you can find us pretty easily there as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Bryan. Thanks for being with us. And if you're curious to learn more, make sure you go to that website or Instagram. Thanks for listening to the ASF podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support us, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating or review. And please don't forget to subscribe.